no sorcerer, but I'll gladly test your steel, old friend.
We'll begin by looking at the estate timeline of the Biltmore. What was George Washington Vanderbilt's original vision for Biltmore? How did that vision evolve through the years? How does his legacy live on today? And our source here is from the Biltmore site itself. 1862, second year of the United States Civil War, George Washington Vanderbilt, what a name, is born on Staten Island. As a grandson of famed shipping entrepreneur and industrialist Cornelius the Commodore Vanderbilt, George Vanderbilt takes his place among one of America's wealthiest and best-known families. And you might recall we came across Cornelius the Commodore Vanderbilt, it's the Commodore, not the Admiral, when he ran afoul of William Walker, our famed filibuster who was from Tennessee, who attempted to assert American control, according to the official account, over Mexico and then furthermore Central America, until he was defeated by an intervening army from Costa Rica of all places. In any event, moving on, 1888, George Vanderbilt visits Asheville, North Carolina for the first time, and I'm quite certain he found it a very beautiful and alluring place, much as any of the rest of us did when we came across the beauty of the Blue Ridge Mountains. It captivated George Vanderbilt, and he considers the area as a location for his new country home. I mean, who wouldn't? Shortly after, he begins purchasing land for what will become Biltmore. He hires Richard Morris Hunt to design and build the home, and Frederick Law Olmsted to design the gardens and grounds. 1889, construction of Biltmore House begins. George Vanderbilt's 250-room French Renaissance chateau is a true marvel. Oh, so we're calling this a French Renaissance chateau, the largest undertaking in residential architecture in the nation, possibly the entire land. Over a 6-year period, an entire community of craftsmen, yes, those infinite numbers of craftsmen that we had available at the end of the 19th century, come together to create America's premier home and the remarkable gardens and grounds that surround it. Look at that picture right there. See, we've got scaffolding, so that's a very legitimate construction photo. I'm convinced. 1895, George Vanderbilt officially opens Biltmore to family and friends on Christmas Eve. Of course, what a great time. The country retreat George Vanderbilt has spent so long planning is marvelously decorated and full of festivity, because apparently that didn't take very long either. Infinite craftsmen and people who work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and no safety standards. Not to mention no internet distractions. Anything could be done. Interesting image there. The finished home contains more than 4 acres of floor space, including 35 bedrooms, 43 bathrooms, so more bathrooms than bedrooms, by 8, so you've got communal bathrooms too, and 65 fireplaces. Why not 165 fireplaces? 1898, George Vanderbilt marries Edith Stuyvesant Dresser in Paris. Edith is a descendant of Peter Stuyvesant, or Stuyvesant, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, the first governor of Dutch colonial New York. After honeymooning in Italy, George and Edith returned to live at Biltmore. And by all means, please correct my pronunciation if it's off on this one. Cornelia Stuyvesant Vanderbilt is born at Biltmore. George and Edith's only child is born on the evening of August 22nd in Louis 15 room in Biltmore House. Oh, so was there a Louis 1 through 14 room as well? I'm just being facetious, but why not? It is a celebrity birth, even by modern standards. Oh, isn't that intriguing? So did they put it out in the papers and broadcast it on the radio and then pushed it out on the internet since Nikola Tesla had invented the wireless internet by 1900? Oh well, no matter. 1900, construction of the main dairy and horse barn begins. You'd think they would have had that constructed right after the house. The horse barn is a thriving social and work center for the families who farm Biltmore and the agricultural heart of the estate. It remains a unique connection to the estate's past. 1914, George Vanderbilt passes away at the age of 51. Wasn't that old. George Vanderbilt is buried in the Vanderbilt family mausoleum on Staten Island. Why not build a new mausoleum on the Biltmore Estate? I mean, you're out there in the mountains where it's very pretty. Why wouldn't you just build a new mausoleum? Well, I guess, the Vanderbilt family had to be in their mausoleum. He leaves a legacy of philanthropy, not oligarchy, which Edith continues, selling approximately 87,000 acres of the estate to the United States Forest Service for less than $5 an acre. Philanthropist, but, still less than $5 an acre. We're not giving it away for free. You don't give anything away for free. This includes the Cradle of Forestry as one of the first national forests east of the Mississippi River. Intriguing. 1924, Cornelia Vanderbilt marries the Honorable John Francis Amherst Cecil. 4 names. Maybe if he had 27 names, he'd be even more important. Look at that wedding photo. Quite intriguing. The Cecils are wed at All Souls Church in Biltmore Village, with Edith Vanderbilt escorting her daughter. What else have we got? 1925, George Vanderbilt's first grandson is born. Again, in the Louis XV room. Not one of the other ones. 1928, the Cecils welcome their second son. 1930, Cornelia and John Cecil open Biltmore House to the public. So, right at the start of the Great Depression. The Cecils respond to requests to increase area tourism during the Depression and to generate income to preserve the estate. Alright, so it's the Depression. Who exactly has the money to engage in tourism? And who's actually going to be paying to go see the Biltmore House? Hey, dear, yeah, I know I just lost my job and I have no work prospects, but why don't we head on down to Asheville and go see the Biltmore? I know, we'll empty out the savings because our gold hasn't been seized yet, and I'll sell that, and then we can go to the Biltmore Estate. Sounds like a grand old time. 1942, Biltmore House stores art during World War II. During the war, the house stores priceless works from the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. And why is that? Was there some kind of grand concern that the National Gallery of Art was going to be attacked or sabotaged in some way, shape, or form during World War II? At any point, was there any sort of existential threat to the United States? I mean, unless we're to believe that a U-boat was going to surface there in the Potomac and try to blast the National Gallery of Art with its deck gun. I don't think it'd have the range. Maybe the Japanese could have attacked with their little Zeppelins that they tried, if you ever read about that, riding on the wonderful jet streams. 1960, William Amherst Vanderbilt Cecil returns to Biltmore. Leaving his banking career in New York, William joins his brother George in managing the estate, focusing on self-sufficiency and preserving the estate's historic splendor. Isn't that funny? It kind of reads like the plot of the Dallas revival, the TV series in the early 2000s or the early 2010s. Where's JR when you need him? 1963, Biltmore is officially nominated as a National Historic Landmark. Really, that late? Why didn't they just instantly declare it a National Historic Landmark? You know, it's only one of the largest estates in the world, but, you know, we'll get around to it when we get around to it. The original landmark designation was based on the theme Conservation of Natural Resources. Isn't that rich? 1971, William Cecil plants his first grapevines just below Biltmore House and invited a guy by the name of Jean-Luc Picard to come work it. The inaugural wine vintage is bottled in the conservatory basement. Less than pleased with his first bottling, William Cecil travels to France, see, Jean-Luc Picard, and brings back 6th-generation winemaster, Philippe Jourdain, to be Biltmore's first winemaker. Oh, sorry, Jean-Luc. This goes on. 1983, the Biltmore Estate Wine Company is established. You know, because why not? We'll have a wine company here. Construction begins on a new state-of-the-art winery in what had been the estate's dairy barn. Mr. Cecil's son, William Bill A.V. Cecil Jr., assumes leadership of the renovation. Looks like he's having a grand old time there. Yeah, we're just doing a nice little renovation here. Hey, this is fun. I love every day. 1985, winery opens to the public. And he's named president and CEO of the Biltmore Company. Oh, so now it's a Biltmore Company. Over 100 years after his grandfather, George Vanderbilt, opened Biltmore House to family and friends, Mr. Cecil retires. His son assumes leadership of the company. Oh boy, is there really anything else to go on about this? Oh, then we have the Inn, which opened in 2001. So you can go stay there. And naturally, if you need the true certification that the Biltmore Estate is an old world building, remember, it is a popular wedding venue. Market Gardener's Cottage, 2005. Biltmore Estate opens to overnight guests. Why not? Antler Hill Village opens, so we've got our own little village there, a winery. Biltmore is honored for environmental stewardship in 2012, of course. And then the Village Hotel opens in 2015. And William Amherst Vanderbilt Cecil passes away at the age of 89 in 2017. Looks like a comfortable picture. 2017, Diana Deanie Cecil Pickering is named chair of the board. She's the daughter of William Vanderbilt Amherst Cecil and sister to CEO and President Bill Cecil. So not the Vanderbilts, but the Cecils now, it would seem. Sharon Fenchak becomes head winemaker and vice president. Sounds like a fun job. So a lot of history with this Biltmore Estate, and that brings us to today. So let's take a look at the floor plans. Now let's take a look at the floor plans that we have available from the Biltmore Estate from our friend Richard Morris Hunt, another architect extraordinaire. We'll take a brief look at him, and yes, I'll be looking at the Wikipedia on him. But looking at the sub-basement isn't interesting. It's the sub-basement, as they call it, the lowest floor. We have the plant storage room. We have several boiler rooms, boiler and coal rooms, storage rooms. And one of the most notable aspects about the Biltmore is that it is a self-sufficient, quote-unquote, estate. It reminds us of many of the so-called asylums and vast hospital complexes that we've looked at in other explorations, where we see that they have the capability to be self-sufficient with their own power and quite a layout. And indeed, when we look at some of the photos and the on-site footage, we'll see that there is some impressive construction that went into the foundation of this building. But we'll look at the construction photos in a moment. And in the basement, we have a kitchen in the courtyard, servants' dining room, servants' pantry, open to plant storage room below. Very intriguing. Numerous corridors, folding rooms, other corridors. Oh, and then there's a gymnasium and a lounging room, apparently. And this is where the great swimming pool is. That's an interesting thing to look at. And you've got your bowling alley, because, it just wouldn't be a place unless there was a bowling alley. The Halloween room. Is this the room where they practiced Halloween every day of the year, 365 days a year? Not really sure. Going up to the main floor, here we have the winter garden, the banquet hall, the billiard room, the breakfast room, the corridor, the balcony, music room. Very interesting. Butler's pantry. So many corridors, bachelor's wing hall, vestibule, and numerous vestibules, a carriage porch, an office. So many different rooms with so many stated purposes. Oh, here is the library, and then the den off the library. So you could go to the library, get a book, and then chill out in the den. Very intriguing. And breakfast room, and the music room. I think that's what all of our houses are missing, or our apartments. We all need a breakfast room and a music room. Let's go to the upper 3 floors. And we'll start with the second floor. And here we can see the top on the garden. Second floor living hall. There is the Louis XV room. Oh, I'm a little disappointed. I was expecting to see every other Louis room. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. That's the Louis XVI room. There's the Louis XV room. Interesting. So no Louis 1 through 14, but we do have a Louis 15 and a Louis 16 room. Yes, I know. When you look at enough Roman numerals, they all start to look at the same. Very intriguing numbering system, isn't it? We have the staircase hall. We have Old English. Chippendale. Yeah, that's what it's called. Sheraton? Do we have the Holiday Inn Express room as well? Very interesting with all these different rooms and all their naming conventions. Mr. Vanderbilt's chamber. Mrs. Vanderbilt's chamber. Mrs. Vanderbilt gets a little bit of an oval chamber, and Mr. Vanderbilt has a different shaped chamber. And the oak sitting room. So they each have their chambers, and then they could meet in the oak sitting room. Just so much space, you don't even know what to do with it. Chamber, chamber, chamber. Outside balcony. Open to banquet hall below. Yes, so much space and so many plans. Let's go to the third floor. Third floor living hall. Everybody has to have their own living hall. South Tower room. North Tower room. How come they don't have elaborate names? Oh well, doesn't matter. The Van Dyke room. Yeah, not going to go anywhere with that one. Watson room. The Madonna room. Was there some figure of the Madonna in the Madonna room? Very intriguing. All these named rooms, and we're only on the third floor. Chamber, chamber, numerous chambers, as in, we don't know what to call it room. We'll just call it the room of rooms, room 1, room 2. Just number it. We've run out of ideas. Fourth floor. Observatory. Servant, servant, servant. So all the servants got put up on the fourth floor. Very intriguing. But, they provided them an observatory and a nice little staircase. So what do you think of these plans? Would you like to have a structure laid out like this? And what other purposes do we think that this structure originally served in its original intention? Well, let me know what you think in the comments. Now let's take a look at some of the collections that you'll find in the Biltmore Estate. So let's take a look at some of the collection highlights of the Biltmore, and much like many other wondrous Gilded Age mansions or impressive compounds or complexes or whatever we want to call them, The Biltmore consists of more than 92,000 items, from architectural drawings of the house to works by Monet and more. A limited selection is highlighted below, including one of its oldest pieces and its newest addition. Italian Renaissance wellhead, circa 1500. Maker unknown. I'm surprised it's not referenced to some sort of Renaissance wonder. Location East Terrace of Biltmore House, and we can see that it's quite an impressive wellhead. Looks like we've got the old lion and some figures in it. Made of Rosa de Verona marble, this fountainhead was likely originally used to decorate and protect an active well in Venice during the Italian Renaissance. Likely. A likely story. It has become known as the Hunt Fountain, as it is depicted in the John Singer Sargent portrait of Biltmore House architect Richard Morris Hunt. Well, why not? I mean, he was the super architect who did it all. Triumph of Faith, circa 1530. Maker unknown. Belgian. So how could... Never mind, forget it. Tapestry Gallery of Biltmore House. Part of the triumph of the Seven Virtues series, this tapestry is centrally woven with the personification of faith as the female figure on the chariot holding a church, the cross, and a chalice. Above her are members of the Trinity. Very interesting. And is that indeed what it's showing, or is that what they're telling us it's showing? That's always the interesting thing when you associate dates and stories with items, but is that really what's associated with them? That's something that we always need to question. Chinese fishbowl, speaking of questioning things, circa 1573 to 1620. Very exact range there. Again, unknown maker, but it's Chinese. Library of the Biltmore House. Glazed porcelain fishbowl, decorated with the imperial five-claw dragon. There's the five claws. Is from the Wanli period of the Ming Dynasty. While there are 3 Chinese fish bowls in the Biltmore collection, this one is the smallest, the most colorful, and likely the rarest. What is that word again? We get a lot of likelies and probables. When did something become a something or a whatever, says Captain Picard. Very interesting. Ebony cabinet on stand, circa 1650. So, again, now we have a much more precise date. Maker, possibly Jean Mace or Pierre Gaulle? French. Location, oak sitting room of Biltmore House. This elaborate furnishing, and yes, it is very elaborate. Let's take a look at this without reading the description that we have on it. Looks like we got some nice vases on top of it. Very intricate patterns, though. And I always wonder on the origin of these particular items. Let's take a little closer look, because naturally we have limited access to these images. Very intriguing symbols that are depicted on this, and it's very intricate as well. Not sure exactly what to make of it. What are your thoughts on this ebony cabinet on stand, circa 1650, made by one of 2 French individuals? Oh, it also features a painting of Juno and Jupiter. The Chariot of Aurora, circa 1720. And here we actually have an individual identified, Giovanni Pellegrini, Italian. Library of the Biltmore House. So, wonderful works of art in that library. Richard Morris Hunt designed the library to accommodate the ceiling painting. I want a ceiling painting in there, Mr. Hunt. Please design the house to accommodate it, which George Vanderbilt purchased from dealer Joseph Spiridon under Hunt's advisement. Okay, wait a minute. So Hunt said, why don't you purchase this, and then you'll direct me to accommodate this painting that I told you to purchase. I'll tell you what, these stories become more convoluted. I mean, these official historical accounts become more convoluted the more you read them. Yes, I'm saying that. Originally located in the ballroom in Venice, in the Pisani Palace. 13 separate canvases and measures about 64 feet long by 32 feet wide. Now, here's the thing I always wondered in all these accounts that we have of this artwork from Europe that ended up in all these Gilded Age mansions across the United States. How was it the European nations just stood idly by and allowed this to happen? Oh, I know. Money. Money speaks everything, doesn't it? Now, do we really think that they would allow that to happen today? Let's just say we have some, we'll call him a philanthropist. An American philanthropist who wants to purchase all these wonderful European cultural artistic treasures. Are they really just going to stand by and let that happen? If the price is right? Never mind. Louis XV mantle clock, circa 1760. And here we have the makers designated and then some possiblies. And it's in Mrs. Vanderbilt's bedroom in Biltmore House. Oh, did Mrs. Vanderbilt have her own bedroom too? An intriguing account, isn't it? Kind of reads like the account that we have of the Hearst Castle over in California, one of many clocks in the Biltmore collection. Yes, that is quite an elaborately embellished piece. And it looks like we've got the 4 eyes for 4 there. The Louis XV style is characterized by curved shapes, a lightness or playfulness of design, and liberal use of gold, among other things. Very intriguing. What else do we have? Oh, the overmantel. Again, a 50-year period, circa 1700 to 1750, and an unknown maker. Swiss. Unknown, but we know it's Swiss. Tyrolean chimney room in Biltmore House. Serving as the focal point of the Tyrolean chimney room, this unique overmantel is an example of the incorporation of antique items into the design of the Biltmore House. So once again, we just have this vast amalgamation, this collection of all these very intricate and wondrous art pieces that all came from Europe, whether it was Switzerland, France, Italy, and again, no issues over in Europe because, the price is right. And look, it's George Vanderbilt. You just can't say no to him any more than you could say no to William Randolph Hearst in the 1920s. Look, they need artwork to adorn their places with. Very interesting. Netsuke? Unknown? Japanese? Are we sure? Quite an interesting little critter, isn't it? This is one of many Netsuke that George Vanderbilt collected during his 1892 trip to Japan. George Vanderbilt got around. Originally created as toggles to secure a storage bag to a kimono sash, Netsuke became highly treasured by Western collectors in the 19th century. Netsuke are exceptionally tactile objects and miniature sculptural masterworks. Yeah, I would say so. Is a mugwai a miniature sculptural masterwork? Never mind. Moving on. Ooh, I like this. Game table and chess set, circa 1820. Makers unknown. Biltmore Legacy. This Empire game table and its natural and red-stained ivory chess set were owned by Napoleon Bonaparte during his exile on St. Helena. Hey, did we get to see our good favorite actor there toying around with these things? Joaquin Phoenix, you're going to play with that chess set, but you're going to be thinking of Josephina, because that's what Napoleon did while he was playing chess. The movie showed it, and it was very clear. It's unclear how James McHenry acquired the table and chess set, but in 1883, he gifted them to George Vanderbilt for his 21st birthday. Oh, goodness. Hey, Josephine. Hey, Josephina. I'm thinking about you. Yes, I'm toying around with the name, okay? It's just very intriguing. The chess set that Napoleon had in his exile on St. Helena somehow ended up with George Vanderbilt. Is there any way to verify or, maybe do Pawn Stars in the 19th century? Okay, never mind. Roger and Angelique on Hippogriff, circa 1840 to 1900. Again, a vast array of time. And we're saying this is French. Location is in the Tapestry Gallery in the Biltmore House. Very interesting sculpture, though. Yes, I've never seen a horse with hooves like that, but yes, I know it's a mythological figure, or at least a representation of one. Really has you wondering what's going on here, and is there something else being depicted? That's what's always intriguing looking at these old works of art. Oh, and I haven't mentioned it yet, but yes, we have our old favorite symbol that's depicted on every single piece. Nothing odd about that. And I think we'll stop with this one here. The Triumphal Arch of Maximilian, a 30-year period, 1849 to 1879. Albrecht Dürer, German. Well, so now we got the Germans involved here. Music Room of Biltmore House. This woodcut commissioned by Emperor Maximilian I to distribute as propaganda. Propaganda, what's that? Oh, I know. That's something that was done in the past by rulers and sovereigns of nations to have people think their particular way. We don't have propaganda in the 21st century. We have information, good information and bad information. It was created with 192 separate blocks. Though the original was made around 1515, this version was printed in the second half of the 19th century. And George Vanderbilt just happened to be an avid collector of the prints, and so naturally he procured it. Quite impressive, and very intricate as well. Someone should have a triumphal arch like this built. I'm kind of surprised that George Vanderbilt, or any one of the Vanderbilts for that matter, didn't have a triumphal arch like this built. I mean, they achieved the greatest triumphs just in building this. Oh, the desk set. Okay, I know I said I was going to stop, but I'll just look at this desk set here, because here we have another Louis XV style desk set, also known as the Encrier, is made of ormolu and tortoise shell. Very elaborate. I certainly agree with the description on that. And some very intriguing figures in this. So what do you think these selected pieces are showing us? And what does this tell us about the Vanderbilts? And why is it all of these individuals of importance, whether we call them robber barons, philanthropists, oligarchs, or just simply self-made individuals of tremendous esteem and ability from the 19th century? How did they happen to end up with all this art? And how could there be this much art to go around? And again, was the price just right and nobody in Europe wanted to resist all these upstart Americans acquiring all this? What are your thoughts on this? Let me know in the comments. So let's take a look at the construction photos that we have of the Biltmore Estate. Very intriguing here. It looks like we have a makeshift railway that ran right up to the estate. Well, that's very sensible, and it certainly sorts out a number of logistical issues, and given how easily they could construct and throw up railroads anywhere that they wanted to, and apparently build locomotives because they had so many they were crashing them during that time frame, and then a couple years later. So we're informed that the Biltmore is constructed solely out of bricks and that lovely Indiana limestone, which there seemed to be an infinite amount of. And yet what appears to be limestone bricks, and again in the images here we have a lot of people standing around, although it looks like some people are working here, many cranes, and I'd like to know exactly how they excavated this out, because this is 1889, early 1890s, and whenever this photo was actually taken. How exactly did they dig all this out? Because they didn't really have heavy machinery available yet. You can see the cranes that they're supposedly using. And once again, these images seem to create more questions than they actually answer, and certainly we can question the veracity of them, but for the purposes of this exploration, we're going to take these images at face value, because it's even more interesting when we accept the account as it is, such as this picture we have of these individuals here by the construction with all their nice and fancy hats. And yes, these individuals don't look remotely ominous in any way, shape, or form. Just looks like a collection of well-meaning individuals, gentlemen primarily, who are just hanging out for the evening. He looks awfully familiar. Where have we seen that face before? I'm not exactly sure. Looking at some of these other images, though, we can see an elaborate complex that seems to have been constructed to complete the construction of the Biltmore Estate. Now, what you would expect to see, especially in something that is very well documented, like I'll give this to the Eiffel Tower, at least they have images that are supposedly in chronological order. Although, things become a little bit more problematic when it comes down to trying to decipher the chronological order of the Biltmore Estate images that we have of the construction. And again, we see a lot of the scaffolding and rudimentary cranes that were available. And I was kind of hoping to see a hamster wheel crane. Another image where we have individuals simply standing around and looking really cool as they do the construction. Well, we know why they had to stand around, it was so because of the limitations of the photographic technology and the cameras at the time. If they were moving, it would be very blurry, except for when they were doing the grand pass and review in Washington, D.C. after the Civil War. So very interesting, and I would expect to see more images showing potentially all the brickwork, because like I said, what we're told is that the Biltmore Estate, the inner walls are constructed of brick. Granted, this is what we're told. I don't know. I can't verify this because the place is already built, and these images aren't really answering this question, but brick surrounded by that ever omnipresent Indiana limestone, of which there seems to have been an infinite amount of, because this isn't the only structure that they use that wondrous Indiana limestone in. So, very impressive, and yet another conflicting account. And here we can see in this other construction photo, it looks like the structure is already completed, and they're either doing some renovation or remodeling. Now, I'm oftentimes lamenting the absence of interior construction photos, although it does seem to give us the indication that there is some interior construction photos, but again, look at this particular photo. What exactly is going on here? Now, we do actually see some brickwork, but there are many, how shall we say, unique questions that one could ask if they do additional analysis on this photo. Perhaps that's brickwork going on. Very intriguing background on this particular image, where we see some of the layout of the main structure and facade of the Biltmore house. But I think where we'll really find a lot of questions answered is when we actually do our on-site, because seeing something for real is always the best way to assess and analyze it. But looking at these images, we can see supposedly that this is some of the interior construction that was occurring. And oddly enough, it almost looks like we have bricks that are suspended in midair, or at least on top of the X-beams there. Hard to really say what's going on just looking at the images. And of course here we're supposed to be seeing the limestones that are all piled up and then construction of the structure on top of it. So many fascinating and conflicting images that we have that seem to portray many different questions that we would have concerning the construction of the Biltmore Estate. And you might recall in our earlier exploration where we looked at the Biltmore Estate, we saw that the family was with travel and acquiring all the wondrous artwork and the art collection that we just looked at that they had to use to fill this very impressive edifice, this compound, this complex. And indeed, even to this day, we still have an entire village and everything else that's associated with it. So I don't know, it's very hard to tell exactly what to make of these images of the construction of the Biltmore Estate. It seems to be very similar to other alleged images we have. So let's go on site to take a look at the Biltmore Estate, and as we look around we can get an idea for this very impressive Indiana limestone, which again there seems to be no shortage of, especially at the end of the 19th century, to construct such an elaborate edifice. And we can see that there is no detail spared on the construction of the Biltmore, with some of the impressive images that we see in the decorations above each of the windows, which naturally won't become very clear in the construction photos. Sometimes when you're actually on site and you try to reconcile that with what you just saw in the old construction photos or some of the older photos, it almost becomes difficult to really believe that what you were actually looking at reflects what you're looking at now with your own eyes, because you can really verify what the structures are made of. And here we see many of the chimneys, and we can see the vast estate and how much space there really was on it. Of course, laid out by Frederick Olmsted, our good friend who achieved miracles for the Chicago World's Fair. Some of the details that you can see, though, within the particular Biltmore is that each of the balconies has decorative detail, and the towers do as well. And of course, there are the many chimneys. Now, I think it'd be fascinating if there were actually construction photos available of some of that. In the interior, though, you can see that it is very well decorated and adorned, and here we are in the billiards room, with many pictures in it, and we can get a good idea of just how well decorated this place actually is, and seeing this massive fireplace. Now again, this is some other construction photos that were lacking, was the construction of the fireplace and the interior. And again, I don't see that just a couple photos that hint at some of the interior features being completed, such as this column. And of course we never see construction photos of columns, and I can't imagine why. Nice organ. It's exactly what you need in your tremendous Vanderbilt mansion, is an organ. And of course you need every single doorway very well decorated and very well adorned to the top of every pillar. And every single bit of material that you can examine within this impressive edifice is real and genuine. And even this reminds me of some of the wonders that I've seen in the Midwest palaces or the state capitals, to include a very well decorated ceiling, because of course you need to have a very well decorated ceiling. Everything from the floors to the walls to the ceiling, once again, and it's no exception here in the Biltmore Estate. And here we can see some of the elaborate pieces in the vast array of collections that we have. All the wondrous artwork and pieces from around the land, all consolidated in this one single location that just happens to be the largest house in the United States ever constructed. And here again, you can get an idea for something that doesn't really hint of limestone, but almost seems like some sort of advanced concrete or geopolymer. And again, you can see the extent of the estate all the way out to the mountains. And there's no doubt that this is a very pretty land, and there are all kinds of areas here where you could expect someone to want to build their estate out in the middle of nowhere. But I suppose I'm just having difficulty reconciling the story of construction that we're given with what we're actually seeing in this on-site exploration. And once again, we have another one of the fireplaces that of course has columns around it. And again, infinite tapestries and decorations as far as the eye can see. And yes, of course, a very subtle bedroom that we would expect to see. Now, one of the things that I've seen many people ask about in the comments or express concern about is how exactly would someone, even with the wealth of the Vanderbilts, want to live in an edifice like this that would require this kind of cleaning? And that's certainly a great question. I'm also very intrigued by the fact that many of these very large edifices that we have, these mansions, these castles, these vast estates, whatever you want to call them, they have many odd similarities with some of the large asylums and hospitals that we've looked at across the land. And the similarity being that this is an entire compound that you could house many people. Well, the explanation here is that they needed to have servants' quarters, and of course you needed to have a veritable army to keep this place clean and facilitated. And it's just because people who were very wealthy back at the start of the 20th century, the end of the 19th century, had this to do with their wealth, and yet we still consider them philanthropists to this day. Look at this impressive staircase and some of the detail that you see with this. And this is just something that completely baffled me when I saw this in person, because you can see ornate details on the interior of this stairway. And now going down to the basement. And here again, this is not simple brickwork, but this gives you the impression of stones that have been arranged together in this impressive edifice. And certainly not that limestone, but stones that have been painstakingly placed together. Now, you do get the sign of bricks in some locations. But was this really constructed from 1889 to 1895 as we're told? Certainly somebody constructed it. Somebody put the effort to do this. But are we to really believe that it was this army of contractors and artisans who descended upon this isolated location, especially at the time frame, and even constructed this very wondrous pool? Now, what could the original intention have been for this pool? And look at how well arrayed this vault is, if you will, or this chamber that this pool's in. This doesn't exactly reflect what I'd expect of a pool, though. I'll say this for Hearst Castle, its pools seem like they were intended to be pools, but what was the original intention there? Again, looking at the exterior, you can see all the very impressive architecture and all the impressive detailing that went into finishing off the Biltmore Estate. And you can see that calling this place a castle, a compound, yes, we have our lions again, is simply underselling it. And here's a still of the fireplace where you can see all the detail that went into it. Now, how much time would that have originally taken when they really did it? Now, supposedly, this is one of the most well-documented, as we love saying those words, constructed estates. And yet, even looking at this supposed documentation, we still have the same questions that we always have when we look at these elaborate construction photos. And I think that the Biltmore Estate, when they're going to this kind of effort to show and tell us that, yes, this was an edifice that was constructed during what we consider the Fifth Era, or our contemporary civilization, you almost get the impression that they seem to be attempting a little much to try to give us that impression. Yes, we built a train out there. Yes, we had innovation in technology. It was the 19th century. Anything was possible. There were no logistical limitations. We can move the gauge on a rail track in 36 hours for 11,000 miles of track. So, naturally, building something like the Biltmore Estate would be simple and easy. A little something I have for you to close out. Why don't you check and see how long it takes to build comparable modern estates, and see how it compares to the completion of the Biltmore Estate. Well, thank you for joining me. Please like, comment, and subscribe.
I'd love to stay, but